Oh, and welcome to the Digital Kindness Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Marcinek, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, we welcome Debbie Tannenbaum to the pod. Um, Debbie has quite the background. She is recognized as a 2024 ISTE 20 to Watch award winner. Debbie is an ASCD emerging leader, an ISTE certified educator, ISTE community leader, author, blogger, and speaker. She offers schools a wealth of expertise. With over 20 years of experience, she advocates for starting with pedagogy first and then transforming learning experiences by using technology, which is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say on these topics, Debbie. Debbie empowers elementary educators with practical strategies, innovative ideas, and insightful guidance for leveraging technology to amplify student success. Debbie, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I know we had to figure out timing wise, but this worked perfect today.
This is great. Yeah. And so I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad you got the memo about matching me in my
Yeah,
black t-shirt that I wear
no,
on every
I'm
pod.
wearing my
So this is,
shirt.
I love it. I love it. So Debbie, you do a lot of work that I've been following and recently learning about. I heard your Ignite session last year at ISTE in Denver, and I thought it was really powerful. And a lot of times when we're at these conferences, we speak to folks who are in middle school or in high school, and I always feel like, and someone who works in technology, we kind of leave behind our elementary school practitioners and educators in many cases. And so I love that the intention and focus you make on teaching skills, essential technology skills, when kids first encounter technology. Um, we assume digital natives a lot of times in school, but that term is very loaded. It's I think really naive to think that when we just assume kids can just grab technology and go to town with it. And I think we're in this place in this post-pandemic era of education where we were throwing technology in the hands of kids, and a lot of those practices and programs in schools just kept going. And we never stopped to think and reflect about how are kids getting essential technology skills to support and drive the pedagogy that's happening in the classroom. So, in your experience, how can educators foster digital kindness and responsible online behavior among elementary students, especially when introducing new technology?
I just think it's really important. You mentioned the term digital natives, and we live in a society that isn't like this society when I first became a teacher. Our students can't just be digital natives. A digital native can go on YouTube, they can watch a video, they kind of know how to navigate general things. Most of it is consumption based. When we're talking about our students, we really want them to become digital learners. And one of the things that I noticed when I became a tech coach was that, like you said, most of the materials I found were meant for the older kids, but nothing told me how my young students how to navigate these things. And we live in an age where even our pre-K kids, and at least in my district, have iPads. Our kindergartners are using iPads. It's just part of the instructional experience. But a lot of times, the only way that teachers are told it is use a program like an ST Math, use a program like Alexia or a Dreambox. And for a lot of our teachers, the only way they know is that consumption piece and having their kids do some of these, personalized learning programs. But they don't know how to help their students know how to learn with technology, and their students certainly don't know how to learn. And so when I started giving my students instructions, I quickly realized that they didn't have the skills on how to be digital learners. And then when we talk about being online and having to interact with others using digital tools, they certainly didn't have that. I always joke, I've been doing a lot of writing about collaboration recently. I'm working on book number 2, trying to get it published. And um, the book and the chapter I've been working on a lot is collaboration. And you think about the fact that when we teach kids how to work in groups our in our real life world, we are very intentional about it. But when we teach kids how to interact with each other online, most of us, we either don't know how to do it or we don't know where to start. And so really having those our students understand how to respect each other's digital space, how to respond to each other. When you talk about digital kindness, that's so important. How do we interact with each other in a digital world? But before we even interact with each other, we need to be able to use these tools. And so I've been spending a lot of time with how do we first use these tools and show that we understand how to use these tools to learn, but then also when we are on these tools with somebody else, how does that look? What does that sound like? How can we scaffold those experiences? Because far too often we're like, oh, you guys are on a Google slide together. And we don't teach how to work it. And then someone gets mad that somebody messed up their work. And it's about using that technology for good and using it to help each other and learn from each other. That's the whole idea of being a collaborator. So far, often our teachers think collaboration means just turn and talk. Collaboration means you're enriching ideas from learning from others. And, in order to do that, we have to listen to each other.
I think that's all. That's just great, and it's so good, refreshing, I should say, to hear what you're saying because I think a lot of the times we assume that we throw kids into learning management systems and all these tools, and we just assume that they're ready to navigate those spaces, to communicate in those spaces, to collaborate in those spaces without any real guidance from an educator. And so I think that's just important. I want to talk about something that you really highlighted in your Ignite session at ISTE that I was really just blown away by it, and it seems like such a novel concept, but we don't leverage it enough
No.
in how we teach kids how to engage with technology because they understand what a play button looks like or how to pause the YouTube before they know how to do anything
Oh,
else.
yeah.
And I think that's where I'll let you talk about it, but I think that's where we're missing because I think introducing to kids this idea of icon literacy and helping young learners navigate digital tools. I think that's so important. So could you talk a little bit about this
Sure.
concept and how it contributes to building student confidence and promoting respectful, engaged digital interactions?
Absolutely. And it's funny because it's not something that I actually came up with. I was listening to another podcast, the 10-Minute Teacher podcast, and she was interviewing this teacher, Pana Asapatana, and she was talking about how iPads had been thrown in her face and her students couldn't hold on to the steps. And at that point, I had been struggling with teaching my kindergartners and first graders, and I was exhausted. And I saw it, and she was talking about how she started explicitly teaching her students icons. And I was like, well, what do I have to lose? I'm already exhausted.
Right,
And I
right.
started to do it, especially with my kindergartners and my first graders. And I started to teach some icons. And before I knew it, my older kids, my fourth, fifth, and sixth graders were like looking at the things I was doing and they're like, well, why aren't you using this with us? Because they didn't have it either. And I joked that that first year I created like an icon wall, like a word wall. Um, I don't do that anymore because icons have kind of changed so much. It's not a static experience, but I've started to really explicitly teach icons to my students. They always joke at the beginning of the year, they're like, we're playing icon bingo, aren't we? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but we know all of them. I said, that's right. It's going to be a quick game. And I use a website called Bingo Baker, and you can upload the icons on. And I explicitly teach them. And when I teach them, I don't just say, okay, this is a microphone, but I actually hold up like a fake microphone. We go microphone or we go picture. I actually have use some total body responses with it as well. So that way, when I'm teaching them those things, it's making those connections. And then somebody's like, but you're taking too long for it. Well, once I do that, I don't have to teach them those things again. Um, and it's so important that we do it. I always, today I was working in one of our enhanced autism classes, and I have one student who he loves taking his picture so much and removing the background. Like he finds a way to integrate it into every project.
Right.
He knows how to do that. And he knows all how to use all those tools, and that's amazing. And like that, I'm really happy about that. But we have to give our students that. And every time we switch to a new tool, I teach the icons and then we talk about how they compare because some icons are pretty universal. And then we have programs like even my beloved Adobe Express and Canva, which have elements instead of all those other pictures. And we got to teach our kids how to navigate that. Um,
Exactly.
and I start my
Yeah,
students with, pretty simple programs. My favorite is Wixie, and then we do Book Creator, but I try to start simple, but I want them to make the connections between the tools. And if we don't do those things, our kids aren't going to be able to use them for learning and understanding that I can, I'm a big proponent of universal design for learning as well. That when we understand how to use those tools, those are all ways that we can share our learning with others and also learn ourselves. So it's become very important. And the students know that, like, we don't do anything until we do that. And at this point, and now this is my third year in my school, I'm getting to the point where the students I'm working with, that muscle memory is built, quicker, and I spend less and less time. But it's especially important with our kindergartners and our first graders because their experience might just be with YouTube or playing a game.
right. But I love that though, because I mean, you're going on prior knowledge of these kids in many cases. I mean,
Yeah,
they know these icons, they know these universal icons, like you said, like since the VCR was around or tape players, I mean, the play button has looked the same and
yes,
on most devices and in our digital world as well. So it's like, and I think that also, like you said, it builds confidence within the students. They get excited about it, they get engaged with it. It's a transferable skill. It's
yes,
across
it
the
really.
board. And like I remember saying in your Ignite session, you went through this scenario, this project, and all of a sudden all these kids' hands went up and they were just like lost. And it
Absolutely.
was just, and I loved how you just kind of worked backwards and you solved the problem and were able to connect with and create this icon literacy or pull this from the I can't remember who her name was, who you mentioned, and use that. And I think that's just so powerful, and it's so great to see that at the youngest age, because this is where we got to get kids and start to establish these really good habits in these digital spaces. Um, and so I just want to kind of shift a little bit to your framework of choice, collaboration, and clickability, and how that aims to cultivate digital learning from the start. Can you elaborate on how each of these elements supports the development of a kind and inclusive digital classroom environment and just your approach overall?
Sure. And so I call those my three C's. And basically, I use them as a framework when I present a lot of times on how we should select digital tools for our younger learners, our elementary learners. And it's really done very intentionally because most times when we're talking about digital tools, we're not people don't know where to start with our younger learners. They're not sure where to start. So I try to keep it very basic. The first thing I talk a lot about is choice. Choice is building in that whole idea of universal design for learning, designing learning experiences that are inclusive of all of our students, giving students the opportunity to do videos, to use audio, to use dictation, use text, giving them lots of different choices and making sure that it's not just one way. I'll never forget my first year at the school I'm at right now. I was in a first grade classroom and there was one student during math who refused to participate. But when he was able to make a video sharing his thinking, he loved it. Well, we got to give our students opportunities to do that. He was a multilingual learner and he was nervous about writing it, but oral language develops earlier, but he was comfortable sharing it that way. So choice is super, super important because we want to give our learners lots of different ways of sharing. And it's also, as a teacher, we don't want all of our kids giving us the exact same cookie cutter. We want to be able to let them hear each other. That's the whole idea of, you know, when one student shares and another student listens to them, maybe they're going to get another idea from that. And that builds that student discourse is so important, and it doesn't necessarily happen with paper. But if we give our students lots of different ways to share, then they can also see each other's work, and it also gives them that opportunity to know that their work isn't just for the teacher. Um, Using lots of tools for that, which takes us to the next C, which is collaboration. And I joke the collaboration was the thing I talked about that I was always scared of. Um, I talk a lot about the fact that I taught my daughter to drive. She's 19. I was afraid to take her out driving in the rain, and I finally take her out, and I said, "So how did it go?" And she goes, "Well, I didn't die." Um, I think about
That's
driving in
great.
the rain like collaborating because it was something
Right.
that my students need to have, but I was afraid to do it because of all the what ifs. That's one of the reasons I've been doing so much writing about collaboration, and I've developed, and I that was one thing where I could find nothing to help me.
Yeah.
I
Right.
coded system for of collaboration that I share about a lot, and that helped me to help my students to better collaborate. It helped me to scaffold that experience. But we want our students to use tools that have collaboration available, but not just available, but have it in a way that the teacher can scaffold it. It shouldn't just be like the Wild West, but teachers can assign students to work together, or teachers can teach students how to pick up their partner responsibly, but it's a closed system where the teacher can still monitor, because we want to make sure that it's not about taking things away, it's about giving things and showing kids how to use them. I really strongly believe in. And then the last part goes back to that icon literacy and the clickability. We want our students to use tools that they don't necessarily have to be able to read to understand how to use. It should be intuitive enough that they can learn using symbols. I mean, I know you have a daughter, correct?
Correct. Yeah. 18 months.
He's little, mine are all big. But I remember my son just got a job at our school today as an IA. So
That's awesome. Congrats. That's great.
But like I remember he recognized McDonald's and symbols way before he recognized anything else. Well, we can teach our students to recognize those symbols and use
Yeah.
them to help our students navigate our digital programs. And if we do that, we have to find these digital tools that are really versatile. Educators can be overwhelming educator right now. So if we do what we need to do and we find tools that are really versatile, and that are easy for our students to use, that provide them choice and allow them to collaborate, then we make our jobs a little easier, because we're working smarter, not harder. And it's so important for our kids to understand those things. And so when someone goes, well, how many tools do I need to use? I'm like, start with one really great tool. If one tool I talk about isn't approved in your district, another one will be. Start with those really great tools. And I teach working with fourth graders this year as part of the master schedule. And we started with one tool and we've continued to add tools. And now at this point, they have a whole toolbox essentially of tools that they can try. And now they are able to identify which tools they want to use. So it's no longer like I have to use this tool because my teacher says, but I want to do this. And this program is going to help me to do this better than that program. And that's building in on those ISTE standards and really understanding how to use digital tools to help us learn.
I love that. And I just want to unpack a few things too, because just thinking about my daughter, I mean, it's the lens I wear now for everything I'm thinking about. And, I see the way she was so quick to just look at my phone, um, and be able to push things
Yeah,
very quickly and then go back to them. Like when she figured out how to play something
yeah,
or pause something. Same with an Apple TV remote. She can recognize the symbols on there that are transferable. And so I think that clickability is building confidence. It's helping kids understand that they can branch out, that it's not a one size fits all assessment, or you're giving kids choice. You're allowing them to collaborate and see each other present different ways, and that's how school should be, because that's how
yeah,
life is. I mean, we're not all doing our work in this same line, in this assembly line.
yeah,
We're doing different things, and we're sharing it, and we're collaborating, and we're making ourselves clickable on the internet, and that's all really great to hear, because um I think about that all the time. Like, how's my daughter going to be taught technology at her earliest ages? Like when she goes to school, like what is technology going to look like in 3, 4, 5 years?
yeah,
And then how is she going to be taught that? And that's something where I told my wife I'm going to have to step back, because I don't want to say too much,
yeah.
but I also want to try and help support the
Oh,
school. and
yeah.
and Carl Hooker is great at that. He always talks to me about, he's like, I don't try and pitch my message on them. I try and support and help the teachers at the school where my kids go, and I think that's an important piece. So
Yeah.
um yeah. Go ahead. Do you
No, I was just
recall?
gonna say that's absolutely
Oh,
true, and far too often our
yeah.
teachers of our youngest students are actually the ones who are most fearful of technology. We're doing it in my school. We actually just finished called Lab Sites, where it's essentially like an instructional learning cycle. And because of our testing, we weren't allowed to do it with our grade 3 through 6 teachers. So I invited our K to 2 teachers, and we were doing something where we were using Gemini to talk about how we could include more student discourse in our lessons. And so my kindergarten and first grade teachers came to this experience, and I think they were a little bit apprehensive. Um, but as we continued to work on that, they were really, because I think they thought that they were putting their kids into AI immediately. And I was like, no, no, no,
Right.
I'm going to show you how you can use it to help you. But I also want you to be able to see how you can model these skills for your students, because although our students are not using things like Gemini, they are going to use tools that have AI built in, and they need to understand how they work. And it really made me happy today, kindergarten finished, to see how they saw the possibilities of, here's how I can use it, but I can also then, say to my students, well, I use this thing, I use Gemini to help me come up with more ideas. And we did some of those ideas in class today. And, we were, and let them see that, because far too often I think our students, they either they think that, oh, we can't use it, or they try to use it on their own, and then they're not given any guidance. So it
Exactly.
made me so happy
Yeah.
that we got the opportunity this week to really dig deep into that. And at the end, they came up with a big long list of ways they were going to use it. And at the beginning, they were scared to use it at all.
Oh, and I love that because that's how learning should be across all boards, whether you're an educator or you're a student. And again, and you think about the context in which these our students, our youngest students, like as early as kindergarten, are growing up. I mean, these kids are growing up in a house that most likely has some kind of a device that you can speak to, and it can give you information. When my daughter hears Alexa going off, or Siri, it's a kind of a weird thing for her at this young age,
Yeah,
but kids are around that. Like information is they're growing up in a world where information is in the air. AI is going to make that only more and more
yeah,
interesting in how things unfold over the next few years.
yeah.
Um, and so, since we're on the topic of AI, I'm just going to jump into it. What you talk about AI and introducing at the youngest age. We're not talking about getting all kindergartners into you know submitting queries in generative
No, no, no,
AI,
no,
by
no.
no means. So what should elementary teachers know about AI as a practitioner, and how should elementary students be learning about it at the youngest age?
Well, I think when we start talking about it, I always start with my teachers talking about it as almost like a teaching assistant. And that's what we were doing with these lab sites in school, where we were talking about how, how can it incorporate more student discourse? We realized that Gemini, if you create a gem, we have a closed Gemini system. It can help us to create great seating charts and groups and all these other things. Um, but we have so many things that are in our heads that we have to keep track of, that it can help us as, like an assistant. So that's one of the things that I always talk to teachers about. Is it's great for idea generation. I know I use it before I send any email to check for my tone and to make sure that I haven't said something that I didn't want to say in the way I wanted to say it. But there's so many great uses for it, and I want my teachers to understand that, because it's never been so hard to be an educator as it is now. And it gets worse because, education in many ways is under attack. And so we have to do everything we can to support each other. But when it comes to our students, it could be really simple things like, showing how, showing how the large language model learns from data in a very simple way. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's not Google Draw. I think it's Auto Draw. The Google Auto Draw lets them do that and let them see the
Right.
things. Um, my fourth graders, I have on Adobe Express, and I have them, you doing image generation. And I have them, how would you describe yourself? How would you create a superhero? And really using their language skills to create. And it's so funny because, and talking about the bias we might see. And that's one of the things I really love about Adobe
Yep.
Express, is that it's really good for our youngest students to just start to test those skills out. Um, but starting small. Right now, most of the AI lessons that I've been exposed to are mostly like middle school and up. But I'm hoping that in the future we'll see more and more. I know my district is starting to work on that this summer to develop lessons that are appropriate for our younger students. But teaching them how to use it as a tool, because if we don't teach them how to use it as a tool, they're going to abuse it. And every time I talk about AI, someone's like, "Well, the kids are going to cheat." Well, data shows that they were cheating the same amount before AI as they are during AI. So we need to teach them to use those tools for,
Yeah.
good. And I want them to see what they can create. And so it's been really interesting to talk to them about, well, what language? How did you prompt this? And have those discussions. And with our younger kids, we've been saying, well, here's what we want to make. What kind of words do we need to use and model that experience? It doesn't have to be every kid typing into a prompt, but doing it in a very safe way. I mean, right now, none of our students really should be using them. I know I'm supposed to get a chance to see Gemini 13 plus tomorrow. I'm super excited about that, but that won't be any of my students. Um, but as tools like Adobe Express and Canva, where it's protected and it's integrated, even Book Creator has Adobe Express in it, gives our students that chance to dabble with it, but still in a protected way. And we can teach them how to use those things. So um, I,
Yeah.
th- but it's all about it. But so much has changed even in the last year. Like I think about when my students tried to start using AI last year versus what they can do this year. And it's really, it continues to evolve. So I'm sure this time next year, we'll even have a different conversation.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it reminds me of, like 10, 12 years ago when I was in the classroom and I had students coming into my classroom and they put like Snapchat on their iPad and they put all these different things and I'm like, everyone's like, what is this? We need to block it, we need to ban it.
Yeah.
And then, it was something that I'm like, well, we didn't get ahead of this, like as adults,
Yeah.
and we need to get ahead of this. And I kind of think about the same thing with AI. And if just left if we bury our heads in the sand on it and just let it up to the kids, they're going to develop those bad habits.
Oh, yeah.
And what everything you said, I feel is so important because it's like we're trying to cultivate the good habits at the earliest age because the challenge always with technology is that we can only control so much in our time frame in our
Yeah.
schools. And most kids, I've said this for a long time, come to us with bad habits at technology, even at our
Yeah.
youngest ages.
Yeah.
We don't know if those kids are out at dinner with their family and they're just looking at an iPad for the whole dinner while the parents talk. And I mean, I see that all the time.
Yeah.
And and I get it, but also it's like those kids are seeing have a different perception of what a screen is and could be, as opposed to what you're saying is like think about how we can create and design and collaborate with these tools as opposed to just mindlessly consuming, which as adults and as kids we all do. We all
We
got
do.
in it, but there is a way out. And I like the way you're approaching this is like, we don't need to just throw all these kids into technology tools. I think we need to help break some of the bad habits, but introduce them in a way that's going to be engaging
Yeah.
and exciting for them so that they can see the opportunities that they can create and develop with them. Um,
Yep.
because these kids that are growing up now, I heard my former colleague Joseph South talk about this. These are we're teaching the next generation of AI designers and
Yeah.
who knows what they're going to be building out in the next 10, 12 years. So it's an exciting time, but it's also a good time to, I think, stop and reflect on where we came from with technology and some of the misses that we had.
Yeah.
And just, I
Absolutely.
think about how we can get our kids at the youngest age and make sure they're doing it with intention and
Yeah.
purpose and mindfulness, which is
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
I think about with COVID, and at least in my district where I work, before COVID, it was very intentional as we got one to one. But during COVID, we just threw devices at elementary students and teachers. And so we really need to take a step back and make sure we understand how we're using all of these things. And we're I talk a lot about universal design for learning, but I don't say we're just using tech for tech. We're using tech because it provides universal design for learning. And I'm explaining how, I'm showing the opportunities it gives our students. And it's funny because now when I walk into a classroom, whether I'm doing a lesson or not, they think we're doing something on the iPads or on the computers. And sometimes I'm doing coming in for something else, but they're excited about it. And some of the teachers are like, our kids aren't excited other times. I'm like, because they see the value and they're doing a lot of learning, even if they don't realize it. But we've got to
No,
teach
that's
our
great.
kids all of that right, early. And I'm hoping that as we hit this, the next 10, 5 to 10 years that we start doing that. And it's funny. I used to present to everybody K to 12, and I reached this point where somebody made a comment on my feedback saying you don't have enough secondary examples, and it hit me, and I was like, why am I trying to be everything when this is really what I'm passionate about? I'm passionate. I feel like elementary educators don't get what they need, and that's really my big mission and my passion. And so I'm not going to try to be something I'm not, but I've really catered all of the things I do to meet those people, because I think it's Roy Vaden says that you're uniquely positioned to be the person you once were. Well, I was that person who was lost, and I want to help others so they're not lost.
That's great, and that's so good to hear because you're right. I mean, I've been going to ISTE for quite a while now, and it's good to see. We're not quite there yet, but more focus and attention around elementary education, and just getting more people speaking about it, like yourself, and really bringing it to the front because there hasn't been a lot of focus on that, and that's where the kids are starting,
I
and
was so
and
excited
we
to get
need
to do that Ignite talk and talk about that, like,
yeah.
because I mean, our school's a lighthouse school, so Richard Culotta's kids actually go to my district. So we're part of a project that ISTE's working on with my district. And I'm like, every time I see him, I'm like, elementary, elementary. He probably sees me coming and
Yeah,
he's
no,
like,
and
it's that elementary girl.
right. Yeah, but that's good because you're right. We need voices like yours at big conferences on the big stage talking about these because these kids get to middle school, they get to high school, and we want them to have the foundational technology skills
Yeah.
to be able to create, design, and learn at that level
Yeah.
with a much highly more sophisticated skill sets that they're developing along the way.
Yeah.
So, I've always seen it, as I'm sure you do, is like kind of packing this toolkit. Like
Yep.
we're putting in the basic tools, and then they're getting socket wrenches in middle school, and they're getting other things, and so we're building this toolkit so that when we send them off into the world, they're ready and they're prepared for anything. So, yeah.
I
So I
agree.
want to kind of shift back to a little bit about you also do a lot of work with educators and schools. And I think this is always you talked about it a little bit earlier, is just I also feel that elementary educators have so much on their plate in comparison. They don't have the college essays, or they don't have the pressures of APs and stuff like that. They have a whole other array, a cachet of stuff to deal with on any given day. So, how can teachers balance the integration of technology in their spaces in the elementary level, and can bring in these topics like empathy and kindness, so that kids understand how digital tools enhance rather than hinder their social emotional learning?
I think that it's really important to think about why you're using the technology. I do not believe every lesson needs technology, but think we have to be intentional. I think a lot about based learning where we're dealing with real world issues, and then we're doing that collaboration because we're learning about other people and we're developing that empathy, or we're working together to solve a problem, or things like that. It has to be authentic. We can't just say, oh, we're putting you in a group because we want to put you in a group. We're putting you in a group because we want you to share your strategies and see if your strategies change based on what your partner or the group people in your group said. And then we have to learn how to talk to each other, because nobody wants someone to talk to them in an inappropriate way. And that starts with the adults in the building modeling it, but it also, we have to think about, well, what are we doing, and what is the best way to reach that, and how can we build in those skills? Because unfortunately, those skills are not something that all of our students come to schools with those skills fully developed. And so we have to make sure students understand how to be empathetic, how to listen. That's a really hard skill for a lot of our students, how to self regulate. All of those things are really challenging. and educators have a lot on their plate. So I always think about, don't try to do everything. Find, like I said, find one tech tool and then think about when's the best place to implement that. I know a lot of my teachers this year have really done a lot with math, because once they've done their whole group lesson, they've been able to use some of these digital tools in order to help their students, practicing and reinforcing, giving them different ways of looking at things, but not just giving them, saying we're going to go on the computer, just because. Everything's super intentional and has a reason for it. And I tell them, so many times teachers will say, I want to try this. Well, why? And so
Right.
really thinking about how we can do this. How is that digital tool helping our kids? And if it's not helping them, you know, sometimes doing it old school is the best way. And you know, that's part of being a teacher, and that human in the mix judgment is making sure and it's a skill you have to develop. First year teachers aren't going to necessarily have that. And in our today's world, where we have a lot of teachers who aren't coming out of certification paths, that's going to even take a little longer to develop.
Yeah. No, and I like that what you said is that, technology doesn't have to be an everyday thing.
Oh,
And, and I've been in schools, I've observed schools that, I walk around and I just see kids walk into a classroom and they just open the lids of their laptop and just assume that technology is going to be part of that day.
yeah.
And I think that's something, again, these are like middle school and high school kids. And I think that's important to develop those skills early on for intention and purpose.
Yeah.
Like, when is the technology needed? Myself, I've tried to do that in the past year. I feel like I'm continually hyper connected to my phone and my device, but
Hmm.
I started to think about ways in which I could kind of put that down and do other things, or maybe leave technology behind for doing X, Y, and Z. And so I think we need to approach the same way in the classroom, where technology is not going to be an everyday thing. It doesn't need to be.
Well,
And
I think it's
yeah,
something that we can use on a regular basis, but it doesn't have to be in every part of the day. I think, you know, I'm also not a proponent of, if there is a way the technology can help, not to give it to our students, but I don't want our students to always assume. I do technology classes. Well, not everything I do is necessarily technology is the best way to do it. So to me, technology is a tool. It's not a subject. So
there you go. I love it. I love it. Debbie, this has been a really engaging conversation. I'm sure we could go on for probably hours and
we
talk
probably
about
could.
this.
Are you going to be
Yeah.
at ISTE this year?
Um, I will not be at ISTE this year, unfortunately. I have a family engagement around that time, but plan on being in Orlando next year, and then it'll be right in my backyard in Boston the year after. So excited about getting back to ISTE. Was in Denver last year. It was great. I love Denver. It's such a great, welcoming
That
city.
was
So
fun.
it's really fun. Really fun.
I'm part of the
So
programming committee, so I actually will be there. So that will be super fun.
excellent, excellent. All right. So we ask all of our guests one final question. Um, what are some strategies that you use to step away from the digital world?
It's really funny when I saw that this was one of the questions. I'll just I had a really big birthday last week. Um,
Yeah.
and during my really big birthday, I took the day off of school, and I decided to go do some yoga, and I went and got a massage, which is things I don't normally do. And when I finished that day, I had this big realization that I needed time to slow down. And so one of the commitments I've made in the last 9 days is that at 8 o'clock, I've started to put my phone away, and stay off of the device, take time to slow down. Because, my job is on a screen all day. My side hustle, my business is on the screen. And I'm looking at a screen, and it's funny because I didn't think it was going to have an impact. It's changed my sleep in the last week tremendously. I'm sleeping so much better. And just really trying to be intentional. I mean, so many times we're sitting in a room with another person who we could be having human interaction with, and we're on our phones scrolling, and we're not really getting anything out of it. So I really try, and I have, 4 kids, all adults, but we all do it. But so really try to be intentional, even, and like I said, even if that means it's that 8 o'clock cutoff, which is sometimes hard because sometimes I'm like, oh, I forgot to do this. And it's, but we have to take time away from it. Our lives are so busy and there's so much going on inside of our heads that if we don't take some time to, step away from it, then we're not going to be as good when we come back to it. So
I love that. And I love that you're doing it with intention. 8 o'clock, phone goes down. And you're right. I think a lot of us, I always attribute it as like, I feel like when I go down into the rabbit hole of whether it's Instagram or YouTube or whatever, like I feel like it's putting your head underwater
it
and then
is.
you come up for air and you look around, you're like, oh, there's my wife. I could be talking to her. There's my child doing something over there. What I should be maybe focused there. So I think that's important for all of us. Important lesson for all of us is to, think about and reflect on, our day to day. We're also busy. We're also hyper connected. Anybody listening out there, take this advice, step away, be intentional about stepping away from your technology because we don't need it all the time. And,
No, and it's
that's
funny because
something
I've
that
been reading real books. Like I've been journaling, I've been reading real books, I've been getting back to some of the habits that I used to do that I haven't been necessarily doing, and I'm like, it's kind of nice to take a break from it. And so I hope that more and more people start to think about that because if we don't model this balance, and yes, my kids are all adults, but I want them to be doing it too. If we don't model these things, our kids won't, we're setting our kids up for really tricky situations when they're older because technology is meant to keep you on as long as possible. That's not a great thing about it. There's lots of great things, but we also have to be conscious of the things that technology does that can be, harmful. So
Right. No, that's great. And that's a really good place to end today. So, Debbie, thank you so much for being here today and bringing the energy to the pod. We look forward to hearing about your book. Can't wait for that. And we'll have to have you back on to promote that and share what you're writing about. And thank you again. We look forward to, and good luck to the remaining end of the school year. Hope it's a nice transition into a much needed summer break.
thank you.